Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to the wounded, the broken, the ones carrying the weight of shattered dreams and unanswered prayers. I want to tell you that God is not just aware of your pain, He's already working on it. He's undoing the damage. Life has a way of breaking us in places we never thought could crack. The weight of disappointment, the sting of betrayal, the ache of loss, these are not strangers to the human experience. For some, the damage comes from external circumstances, things beyond your control that seem to uproot your stability overnight. For others, the wounds are self-inflicted, born out of choices you regret but cannot undo. Regardless of the source, the reality is the same. We are all broken in some way. And that brokenness, if left unacknowledged, festers. It takes root and it grows, manifesting in our thoughts, our actions, and even how we see ourselves. You can't begin to heal until you confront the truth of where you are. That's the hardest part, isn't it? It's easier to cover up the cracks, to keep pretending that everything is fine. It's easier to put on a brave face, to mask the pain with busyness, distractions, or even denial. But ignoring the brokenness doesn't make it go away, it only buries it deeper. And what is buried has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it, showing up in your relationships, your decisions, and your ability to trust. Acknowledging your brokenness is not about self-pity or dwelling in despair. It's about honesty. It's about standing in front of the mirror of your life and saying, yes, I am hurt. Yes, I am struggling. Yes, I have lost something precious. This is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to admit that you are not as strong as you pretend to be. It takes faith to believe that even in the broken places, God is present, ready to do His work. Some of us fear that acknowledging our brokenness means giving it power. But the truth is, what you expose to God loses its grip over you. When you name your pain, when you admit your struggles, you invite Him into those spaces. You give Him permission to start His work of healing and restoration. Scripture reminds us that God is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He doesn't shy away from your brokenness. He runs toward it, ready to heal, restore, and rebuild. Acknowledging your brokenness also helps you recognize that you are not alone. Everyone has scars, some are just better at hiding them. The world may celebrate perfection, but God works best in imperfection. He takes the shattered pieces of your life and molds them into something beautiful, something that reflects His glory. But first, you must bring those pieces to Him. Lay them down at His feet. Trust that He can do more with your brokenness than you ever could. So don't be afraid to confront the pain, the loss, the mistakes. Don't shy away from admitting the areas where you feel weak or lost. God cannot heal what you refuse to bring to Him. And in the moment of your honesty, the process of restoration begins. When life feels like it's falling apart, it's easy to believe that there's no rhyme or reason to the chaos. The broken relationships, the missed opportunities, the moments of despair, they can make you feel like your life is spiraling out of control. But what if I told you that even in the mess, there's a plan? Not just any plan, but a divine master plan crafted by a God who sees the end from the beginning. Nothing in your life catches Him by surprise. Every trial, every setback, and even every mistake is woven into a greater purpose. God's plan is not just reactive, it's intentional. Before you were even formed, He knew the journey you would take. He knew the storms you would face, the times you would stumble, and the seasons where you would question everything. Yet He also knew the outcome, your restoration, your growth, and your victory. The master planner is never caught off guard. What looks like chaos to you is a carefully orchestrated process in His hands. One of the hardest things to accept is that God's plan often includes pain. It includes moments where we feel abandoned or defeated. But these moments are not the end, they are stepping stones. Just as a gardener prunes a tree to make it stronger and more fruitful, God allows certain things in our lives to be cut away so that something better can grow. They feel like loss in the moment, but it is preparation for what's to come. He uses every tear, every disappointment, and every heartache to shape you into who you were meant to be. Think of Joseph. whose life seemed to unravel at every turn. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison, Joseph could have easily believed that God had forgotten him. But each step of his journey was part of a divine setup. What looked like destruction was actually preparation for his destiny. When the time was right, Joseph was elevated to a position of power where he could save not only his family, but an entire nation. What the enemy meant for evil, God used for good, and he can do the same in your life. It's crucial to remember that God's plan isn't just about your comfort, it's about his glory. He's not simply fixing what's broken, he's making something new. He's positioning you to be a light in the darkness, a testimony of his power and faithfulness. And while you may not see the full picture now, trust that he is working behind the scenes. Faith in the master plan means surrendering control. It means letting go of your timeline and trusting his. It means believing that even when you can't see it, he's moving on your behalf. The steps may not make sense right now, but when you look back, you'll see how each moment was a part of his perfect design. Rest in the assurance that his plan for you is good, and it is unfolding exactly as it should. Restoration is one of the most profound expressions of God's love and power. When something in your life is broken, whether it's a relationship, an opportunity, your health, or your sense of self-worth, it's easy to think it's gone for good. But with God, nothing is beyond repair. Restoration doesn't just mean fixing what's broken, it means bringing it back stronger, fuller, and better than it was before. This is the power of restoration, God's ability to take the shattered pieces of your life and create something even more beautiful than what you imagined. God's restoration is rooted in his character. He is a God who redeems, a God who takes what the enemy meant for harm and turns it into good. In the natural world, when something is broken, its value often decreases. A torn garment, a chipped vase, a cracked phone, all of these lose their worth once they're damaged. But in God's hands, the opposite happens. The brokenness doesn't diminish your value, it increases it. When God restores, he adds layers of grace, wisdom, and strength to your life, making you more resilient and more impactful than before. The process of restoration often begins in the places where we feel the most hopeless. It's in those moments of despair when we think all is lost that God steps in with his promise to restore. Scripture tells us that he gives beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. These are not just poetic words, they are a declaration of his commitment to transform what seems destroyed into something life-giving and new. Consider the story of Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his family, his health. His life was reduced to ashes. Yet in the end, God restored him not just to what he had before, but to a place of double blessing. Job's story reminds us that restoration is not about going back to what was, it's about stepping into what's better. God doesn't just give you what you lost, he exceeds it. He multiplies your joy, your peace, and your purpose. Restoration also requires your cooperation. While God is the ultimate restorer, he often calls you to take steps of faith. Maybe he's asking you to forgive someone who hurt you, to trust him with your finances, or to step out of your comfort zone. Restoration is not passive, it's an active partnership between you and God. You bring him the broken pieces and he works his miracle. The power of restoration is also a testimony. When God restores you, it's not just for your benefit. Your story becomes a beacon of hope for others who are struggling. It shows them that if God can heal and restore you, he can do the same for them. So don't give up on the areas of your life that seem beyond repair. God's power to restore is limitless. He is not just the God of second chances, he's the God of complete transformation. What's broken today can become a masterpiece tomorrow. Trusting God's timing is one of the most challenging aspects of faith. We live in a world of instant gratification, where waiting feels unnatural, even unbearable. Yet God operates on a timeline that often defies our understanding. His plans are not hurried, and his promises are not rushed. Instead, they unfold at the right moment in his perfect timing. Learning to trust that timing requires patience, surrender, and a deep belief that God is always working, even when we cannot see it. When you're in the waiting season, it can feel as though nothing is happening. You've prayed, you've hoped, you've done everything you know how to do, and still the breakthrough hasn't come. This is where doubt creeps in. Did God hear me? Does he care? Will things ever change? But the truth is, God is never inactive. Even in the silence, he is moving. He's aligning circumstances, shaping hearts, and preparing you for what's to come. What may feel like a delay to you is actually divine preparation. Think about planting a seed. After it's buried in the soil, there's no visible evidence of growth for some time. But beneath the surface, the seed is germinating, establishing roots, and drawing nutrients. Eventually, it breaks through the ground, but that visible growth is only possible because of the unseen work that came first. God's timing works in the same way. The season of waiting is not wasted. It's a time of preparation. He's building your character, strengthening your faith, and equipping you for the blessings ahead. Scripture is filled with examples of God's timing being vastly different from human expectations. Abraham and Sarah waited decades for the fulfillment of God's promise of a child. Joseph spent years as a slave and in prison before rising to a position of power. Even Jesus, the Son of God, waited until the appointed time to begin his ministry. In each case, the waiting wasn't a punishment, it was part of God's plan. And when the time was right, the fulfillment of his promises exceeded anything they could have imagined. Trusting God's timing means releasing your own timeline. It means letting go of the need to control when and how things happen. This requires faith, the kind of faith that believes God's plans are good, even when they don't match your plans. It's about saying, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. I trust that you see the bigger picture, that you know what's best for me, and that you will not fail me. This trust doesn't come easily, but it grows as you spend time in God's presence. Through prayer, worship, and reading his word, you remind yourself of his faithfulness. You remember the times he's come through before, and you hold on to the promise that he will do it again. God's timing is always perfect, even when it feels painfully slow. What he's preparing for you is worth the wait. Trust him, because when the time is right, his plan will unfold in a way that is beyond anything you could imagine. Healing is a divine process, but it also requires your participation. While God is the ultimate source of restoration, he calls us to take an active role in our healing. It's not a passive journey where you simply wait for things to get better. Instead, it's a partnership between you and God, where your faith, actions, and mindset play a crucial role in unlocking the fullness of his healing power in your life. The first step in your role is acknowledging the need for healing. Denial keeps you stuck. You cannot address what you refuse to confront. Whether the wound comes from past trauma, broken relationships, or self-inflicted harm, it's essential to be honest with yourself and with God. Admit where you're hurting and invite him into those places. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's the doorway to transformation. Next, you must let go of the desire to control how and when healing happens. Often we come to God with preconceived notions of how he should fix our lives. We want immediate relief, a clear solution, or the restoration of what we lost exactly as it was. But God's ways are higher than ours, and his healing may not look the way you expect. Your role is to surrender not to passivity, but to trust. Trust that his process, though it may be painful or slow, is perfect and designed for your ultimate good. Another critical aspect of your role is to forgive. Healing cannot flourish in a heart that clings to bitterness or resentment. Forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong or forgetting the hurt. It's about releasing the hold it has on you. When you forgive, you free yourself from the chains of anger and pain, making room for God's peace to take their place. Forgiveness is a choice, and sometimes it's one you must make daily. But each step of forgiveness brings you closer to wholeness. Your actions also play a part in your healing. Sometimes God calls you to take practical steps, seeking counsel, cutting ties with toxic influences, or adopting new habits that promote spiritual, emotional, or physical well-being. Healing often requires change, and change requires effort. It's not always easy, but God equips you with the strength and wisdom to take those steps. Trust Him enough to obey even when it's uncomfortable. Your role involves staying anchored in faith and hope. Healing is rarely instant, it's a journey. There will be days when progress feels slow or non-existent. In those moments, remind yourself of God's promises. Stay rooted in prayer, immerse yourself in His Word, and surround yourself with people who encourage and uplift you. Faith keeps you moving forward when circumstances tempt you to give up. Your role in the healing process is not to carry the burden alone, but to walk hand in hand with God. As you do your part, acknowledging the pain, surrendering control, forgiving, taking action, and standing in faith, He meets you with His power and grace, completing the work in ways that exceed anything you could accomplish on your own. Life often feels like a series of unexpected twists and turns, many of which leave us battered, bruised, and questioning our worth. The damage we endure, whether from circumstances, choices, or the actions of others, can leave us feeling unworthy of anything good. But God doesn't see damage as the end of the story. In His hands, damage becomes the raw material for destiny. He specializes in taking the broken pieces of our lives and transforming them into a masterpiece that reveals His purpose and glory. One of the first steps in moving from damage to destiny is understanding that your pain has a purpose. It's not just something to be endured, it's something that God can use. The trials you face, the heart attachments you carry, and the setbacks you've experienced are not wasted. They are the very things God uses to shape you, strengthen you, and prepare you for the future He has planned. Like a potter molding clay, He uses the pressure and fire of life to refine you into a vessel fit for His purpose. God's ability to transform damage into destiny is seen throughout Scripture. Consider the story of Ruth. She was a widow, a foreigner, and seemingly without hope for a future. Yet in the middle of her pain, she chose to trust God and move forward in faith. That decision placed her in the lineage of Jesus Christ. What looked like an ending was actually a divine setup for something greater. Similarly, in your life, the damage you've experienced is not the conclusion, it's the beginning of a new chapter that God is writing. To step into your destiny, you must first let go of the shame and guilt that often accompany damage. The enemy will try to convince you that your past disqualifies you from God's plan. But the truth is, God's grace qualifies you. He doesn't call the perfect, He calls the willing. Your scars are not a mark of failure, but a testament to God's ability to heal and restore. When you embrace that truth, you can stop hiding from your past and start allowing God to use it as a testimony of His faithfulness. Another key to moving from damage to destiny is perseverance. The journey isn't always quick or easy. There will be moments when the weight of your pain feels unbearable and the road ahead seems unclear. But those are the moments when God's strength carries you. Trust Him even when you don't understand His plan. Each step forward, no matter how small, brings you closer to the destiny He has prepared for you. Recognize that your destiny isn't just about you. It's about the lives you'll impact, the hope you'll inspire, and the glory you'll bring to God. The very things that once caused you pain will become the platform for your purpose. God doesn't just heal the broken, He empowers them to be agents of healing for others. From damage to destiny is not just a personal journey, it's a divine mission. Trust Him to take you there. In the grand tapestry of life, no thread of damage is wasted in the hands of our Creator. Every tear, every wound, and every broken piece is being woven into a masterpiece that reflects His glory and purpose for our lives. From acknowledging our brokenness to trusting His perfect timing. From embracing the power of restoration to stepping into our role in the healing process. And finally, journeying from damage to destiny, God is faithfully undoing the damage. He is transforming us, renewing us, and preparing us for a future far greater than we could ever imagine. Let us stand firm in faith, knowing that what the enemy meant for harm, God is using for good. Let us commit to trusting him through every season, every challenge, and every moment of uncertainty. His plans for us are not to harm us, but to give us hope in the future. Thank you for allowing these words to speak into your life. May you walk forward with renewed hope, trusting that God is working all things together for your good. Thank you, and may his peace and restoration fill your life abundantly.